Hello, Garland Nixon here, and if you're in the U.S., it's the holiday of Thanksgiving. Um, that's a we could talk about that on its own. But what I'm going to talk about is people being duped again, people believing the same old liars about the same old things over and over again, and more. Let's talk. Hello, all, and it's what should I rename it while I'm on the road? Car talk, or hey, well, look, and people are like, "Hey, Garland, got a fishing rod there? You going fishing?" I don't know how much you know about me, but if I find a if it's raining, I'm tempted to throw a lure out in the rain to see if anything bites. I just that's everybody has things that they love, and with me, fishing. I started when I was a little kid. Used to go fishing with my dad, and you know how that is. Once the fish bug bit me, it never let go. All right, so let's talk. Um, one of the things that struck me about the US and maybe even the West period, about people, in general, is the issue of trust. Who do you trust? Why do you trust them? And over the long term, do we trust people because they earn our trust? Do we trust people because they have a record of being trustworthy? I don't know. Let's start right here. I could go on and on, but I'll give you four instances. We'll go to four things. We'll start with 1991. The United States wanted to invade Iraq and wanted to attack Iraq. I could go on and on about the whole thing where with it, there's a lot to be discussed. That's a whole show about the first Iraq. But just think about this. 1991 is the year that the Soviet Union dissolved, and shockingly, is when the United States started its military crusade in the Middle East. Really started its latest military crusade in the Middle East. If you think that is a coincidence, then you probably think that the reality that the Iranian Revolution, when they overthrew the U.S. installed dictator in 1979, was coincidentally 1 year before the Iraq war started. If you think those things are all coincidences, then you're probably in the same ballpark, right? But they ain't. Let me continue. So 91, they didn't have, the US government did not have the support that it needed for the Iraq war. So they hired some K Street public relations firm to lie to the American people. And they came up with this plan. And they had this woman who later on turned to be like the daughter or related to like one of the Kuwaiti ambassadors or diplomats or something. This thing was a total fraud. They brought this woman in and they came up with this story where the Iraqi soldiers were in Kuwait City and they went into the hospital and they threw the babies out. Remember, these people are animals now. These are monsters. They're not even humans anymore. They threw the babies out of incubators onto the floor. She fake cried. And and therefore, that showed how evil they were. And that story got out and she went to Congress and the support went up to 60%. Voila, they can go forward with their war. But the only problem is it was a complete, absolute lie. These are the people that are like, Trump lies. We can never trust Trump because he tells lies. He lied about having sex with a hot babe. Yeah, he never does. Guys don't do that. Hey, but at any rate, he lies. We can't trust him. They lied us into the first war, the first attack on Iraq. They lied us into it. And was anybody ever held accountable? No. Did we find out that it was all lies? Yes. They lied us into a war. Fast forward to 2003. The United States then cooks up another lie. Of course, we could go into 9/11, and those of us who are highly suspect of the official narrative. There are those who come up with all these things. Oh, it was the planes and it was fake planes and it was fake people and it was fake all of that. Yeah, crap on all of that. I don't have the answers. You make us look like schmucks when you come up with some um what's the term? Hapless scenario that it happened. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know the truth, but we do know that we always get lied to. So it would be reasonable to suspect that we were lied to again. But at any rate, so I ain't going to get into 9/11 because I don't know the answers. I just know you'd have to be a fool to believe the major the official government narrative. 2003 comes and the 2002, 2003 comes and they need to invade Iraq. So they cook up a story about weapons of mass destruction. Now, there are people that even to this day who won't admit that that they got took. One thing you got to remember about that, and that is that a guy, 60 Minutes had a story. And a guy, I can't remember his name, but he at the time, he was the head of the CIA, I believe, for Europe. And it's still online. And it was a 60 Minute story. And he came in and he said, look, we turned some high people in the Iraqi government and we said, all right, we want to know the truth. We paid them off. We got them there. And we said, give us the truth about the Wmd's. And they said, there ain't none. They've all been destroyed. There ain't none. He said, so then I went to the Bush administration and I said to them, hey, we got good news. We got the details. We got the information. We know for a fact now. We believe it. We believe it. This guy is trustworthy. He's at the highest levels. There are no weapons of mass destruction. And he said, look, I expected to get a smile and a high five and all that. He says, and Bush and Cheney and Rice, etc., just looked at him with a blank stare. And they said, this is not about weapons of mass destruction. This is about regime change, right? So on 60 Minutes, a high-ranking CIA guy admitted and told him they knew there wasn't any. Now, but Trump's a liar. He has to be dealt with. He has to be charged with 91 charges. These people lied. And we now have pure evidence that they lied us into a war. None of them were ever dealt with. None of them ever paid a price. But we found out that we were lied to in 91. We found out that we were lied to in 2003, but 2/3, both of them lies, lie after lie after lie, right? With full knowledge and malice, they lied to us. Here's my question to people like to you: how the hell many times do you have to get lied to? Thank you. Hey, there's my buddy Caleb Maupin online. Thanks a lot, Caleb. The question is obvious, and I always watch Caleb's stuff. He's a good friend and a great guy. I love Caleb Maupin. Anyway, so let's continue. How many lies does somebody have to tell you before you don't believe them anymore? I've often used it this: if I get on the subway in DC and I sit next to this guy and I get up and I look and he's running out with a grin on his face and my wallet in his hand. He stole my wallet. I get in the next day. I look, there's the guy running out again. He was sitting next to me with my newest wallet in the hand. He's robbed my, am I going to sit down? How many times does this guy have to steal my wallet before I realize he's a wallet thief? Can't be trusted. Don't sit next to him. Don't get anywhere next to him. He's going to rob you, right? Once should be enough, but God forbid twice. Okay, here's my point. And I just used two glaring examples. I could go with many, many examples of how we've clearly been lied to by our government about foreign policy and other things. Along comes COVID. And COVID it is an important issue for this reason. Whether it was the jab, whether it was 6 feet apart, whether it was all of the various things that we were told about COVID, it comes down to something. Again, trust, right? It goes back to this. There were people who said, I believe we've got to do these things. Why? Because they'll keep us safe. There is an implication there, though. There's a foundational implication when you say the government has come up with policies. We should follow the policies because these policies will help to keep us safe. That implies that you believe that that government is trying to keep you safe, doesn't it? It implies that you believe that that government is acting for your best interest, right? They're trying to make us safe. But if you don't believe that, you're going to question those policies. I believe that's a big part of what we ran into when it came to COVID. What we ran into is a bunch of people saying, hey, the government's trying to keep us safe, therefore we got to stand 6 feet apart and do this, and take the jab, and all these wearing masks and all that stuff, right? And there were people like me and a lot of people probably right here in the chat who said, wait a minute. And people brought up the anthrax. Again, anthrax, right? I got to add that in. We find out from anthrax that, it's coming, and we get like, oh, it's the anthrax. It came from probably the weapons of mass destruction guy, Saddam Hussein. And eventually we find out that the anthrax came from Fort Detrick, Maryland, from the weapons biological laboratory at Fort Detrick. And what we're told is there was a doctor there who I guess was angry, disturbed, crazy, whatever they try to say, and that he snuck the anthrax out, and that he's the one that sent the anthrax all over creation. Okay, so now we find out that the anthrax didn't come from Saddam Hussein or some crazy person. It came from Fort Detrick in Maryland from the biolab. And we then find out that this so-called doctor who supposedly did it committed suicide. What was he, an enemy of Hillary Clinton or something? I don't know, but whatever the bottom line is. So it's like, oh, okay, great. You got the guy who did it. Now they can question him. Now we can find out what this whole anthrax thing was about. Oh, darn. Wouldn't you know it? The poor bastard. He just couldn't take it, and he committed suicide. Oh, okay. How convenient is that for those of us who are extremely suspicious of the government? Let me, you know me. None of my streams are good until the phone rings. All right. Now we can go. Now we can have a stream because my phone has rang. You get the picture. Let us continue. I'm all going somewhere. Because it comes down to this. I ain't going to trust that guy after he stole my wallet repeatedly. I'm not giving him another wallet. And if he says, hey, Garland, you can sit next to me. No, dude, you're a wallet thief. Trust me. Did I steal your wallet a couple times in the past? Fair enough. Okay, but let's let bygones be bygones. Let's move on. Let's put things behind us. People make mistakes and errors, but this time, I swear to God, I swear, so help me, I will not steal your wallet. Yeah, you ain't going to steal my wallet because I ain't sitting next to you, because I'm not a sucker. I'm not a dupe. You ain't going to keep stealing my wallet. I don't have to think about this again, do I? Do I have to think about this? No. Now, I can look at weapons of mass destruction. You literally lied me into a war twice. You've lied about everything. Anthrax, God only knows what happened with that. And then, of course, along comes COVID. And so, might I add, this is how bad it is in COVID. Those of us who have lost all trust for the government, if we had any in the first place, say, look, tell you what, somebody said, this is Garland in its surveillance van. Yeah, I'm surveilling the area for fish. I'm sure there's a suspicious fish somewhere around. And if it is, I'm catching them. Oh, there we go. Garland's fleeing. That's right. I'm on the lam. The FBI's at my house. They're crawling all over the place. So, I've got to do it from, I'm running from the man. So I'm in all kind of various locations. I'm here, then I'm here, then I'm here, now I'm over here. They'll never catch me. All right, let's keep going. So, I have my suspicions about COVID, but we ain't getting into that. But and I could give you data, but here's the bottom line. Maybe I'll do a show on that sometime soon. Here's the bottom line. Those of us who were suspicious said, okay, there is obviously something out here and some people are getting sick. We need further data because we don't trust you bastards because you lie to us every single time. And we're suspecting that this is another one of those times. So let's go here. We're supposed to stand 6 feet apart. Absolutely. That's the only way that you can be healthy. So we said, fair enough. I'm sure there's some data that came from. I'm sure there's some science. Trust the science, right? We want to see the science. No. Okay, fair enough. Masks. Hey, maybe masks will help. I don't know. We don't know a lot about the illness. It's a respiratory illness and whatever. What's the size of the mask? What kinds of masks will help? How will they help? What are the numbers? What data have you? Do we have any data? Shut up, you stinking. You're killing people here. You anti-vaccine madman. How dare you ask questions? Trust the science. Trust. Remember this? Trust the science. And that's where it went bad for people like me. No, I'm not going to trust it. Trust the science. Science is a process, right? Can I trust the process? Yes. Trust the government who's telling us? No. So I tell you what I'll do. I'll trust the process, but I won't trust the government because they lie to me every time. Well, no, I'll go differently. Yes, I will trust the government because they lie to me every time. So why wouldn't I trust them? I trust. You know who I trust? I trust the guy that stole my wallet. Hey, Garland, sit next to me on this subway again. Sure. No, that ain't happening, pal. Because don't you trust me? Absolutely, I trust you. You stole my wallet the day before yesterday. You stole my wallet yesterday. I trust that you'll steal it a third time. It's not that I don't trust you. The problem is that I do. That consistency is the safest bet. I'm watching this guy, and he's run 10 races in a row, and he's running his 11th race. All things being equal, I'm betting on this guy. Why? He's run 10. I trust that he will win again. He may not, but I'm going with the odds, right? The highest probability. So you lied to me about something as important as war. I find out that you lied to me about the Soviet Union when you knew they weren't going to do certain things, and you lied and said they were. When they had certain capabilities, and you lied and said if it was convenient, you lie and say they didn't. If it was also convenient, you lie and say they did. It didn't matter. So I have a history of my government lying to me, threatening me. Look up Operation Northwoods. And my own government wanting to bomb me, drag me into war, do terrible things to my people, right here in this country, the American people. And you can say they are my people or they're not. I don't care what you say. But whatever, you get my point. Bottom line is this. I didn't trust them. And when we attempted to deal with that by saying, I don't trust you, and you don't deserve trust, but I will trust you if you get me the data. No, excuse me. They said, trust the science. I will trust the science. Show me the science. Show me the science. I'll trust the science. Show me the science that says 6 feet apart is going to help. I'll trust it if you show me the science. No, you stupid anti-vaxxing, crazy conspiracy theorist. You can call me names, but I still ain't going to trust it. Right? On and on and on. We're told things that are not consistent. So being told things that are not consistent causes us to have great trepidation about continuing to trust you guys to do something other than you've done. Think about it. What they're saying is trust us to do something other than what we've done in the past. We lied to you every time in the past, but trust us this time to do something other than lie to you. No, sorry, that ain't going to work. So you got weapons of mass destruction. Trust us. You got COVID. Oh, man, we're telling you the truth now. And post-COVID, we look back and we found out what? That when we were asking them, why should we stand 6 feet apart? And they said, trust the science. And we said, we want to see the science so we can trust it. And then they attacked us as being crazy loons and threw us off of social media for even having such a discussion. We find out eventually that they didn't have any science for 6 feet apart, that they just came up with it. Yep, staying 6 feet apart. Is there any science? We just came up with 6 feet sounds good. 6, 7. It's better than 7. And a little farther than 5. So we figured 6 is a good number. You might as well roll the dice. You might as well took a dice and threw it up in there and say, wherever it landed, that's the number. There you go. Trust the dice. That's what we're really telling us. Trust the dice. And we said, no, the dice we trust, the science we trust, the process we trust. You lying son of a gun, you're the ones we don't trust. And there we go. So all of these things we kept seeing, and we could go online and search and find out data. We could find out actual data. And we said, but you're telling us to trust the quote science. Okay, fair enough. The process of science, of coming up with a theory, of testing the theory. Sure, that's a great idea. Give us the damn theory in the first place. No, just trust what we say. There wasn't even a theory to trust. Again, what do we get back to? This word over and over and over. Stephen Covey wrote a book about it. Actually, a very good, a short and simple read called The Speed of Trust. Right? You know me, I love to read. I read all of that Stephen Covey stuff, right? And The Speed of Trust was an excellent book. You got trust, it's easy to get things done. If you don't have trust, it's hard to get things done, isn't it? So we go through COVID and we're like, we got no trust. And the more we dig into things, the more we find out we've been lied to. Then we look into Dr. Fauci's emails are released, and we find out that as soon as COVID hit, there were scientists sending an email saying, I kind of think this might have been made in a lab. And immediately after, this Fauci team went about discrediting anyone who had that suspicion. It wasn't an unreasonable suspicion. Even if it was an unreasonable suspicion, what's the cure? What is it? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. If it were an absurd theory, which is fine with me if it were, but it's still a theory. Doesn't science work off theories? Alchemy, which they initially believed that to be, there's been a philosophical discussion of alchemy, but at one time in one particular area of the world, alchemy was believed to be the science of turning lead into gold. Like you can somehow turn lead into gold, right? And there was a science they believed, and they tried to do that, which was fine. It was a theory. They worked on it. They never figured out how to do it. Probably can't be done. But my point is this: as long as they were attempting to do that, that was the scientific theory that they were working on. It wasn't madness. You could say, let's figure out how to turn wood into gold. All right, let's work on that theory. That actually is science if you keep trying to do it. And at some point, through falsification, you realize that you can't. Even though it was maybe a preposterous theory, guess what? That's science. Trying to prove or falsify a theory, as they say. Now, we continue. So, as COVID goes on, and people start saying, hey, I think we've been hoodwinked, as Malcolm X said, we've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, misled, led astray, right? And those of us who were suspicious, I didn't think I had the answer, but I remember very early saying, yeah, there's something suspicious about this whole thing. I got some issues here, right? Then I'm like, isn't it weird? In August of 2019, um, what was it? Fort Detrick, the same Fort Detrick in Maryland, the same chemical and biological weapons laboratory. And first week of August, it closed down suddenly, and it was all in the newspapers. And then a month later, Donald Trump signs a darn what was it? It was a executive order that was preparing for a pandemic. It had the word pandemic in it 18 times. That was in September. Then in October, they had Event 201. What the hell was Event 201? It was a preparation for a pandemic. But what kind of pandemic? Specifically, a coronavirus pandemic. August, Fort Detrick suddenly closes down like something weird happened. September, Donald Trump signs a pandemic preparation bill. October, the Bill Gates Foundation and John Hopkins has Event 201, which you can still go online right now and watch. Right now, look it up. Go watch it online. Event 201, October. And what are they doing? Hey, guys, just in case there's a coronavirus pandemic, we better prepare for one. Not that there would be one, but if there were. And then a month later, we're told what happens. You're going to be shocked to believe this. There's a coronavirus pandemic. We'd have never saw it coming, but mysteriously, luckily for us, we've been preparing for the last 3 months for this thing that we had no idea that it would ever come. But, it has nothing to do with Fort Detrick mysteriously closing down. But what do you know? Or a mysterious vaping disease showing up just after Fort Detrick closes down that seems to have disappeared as soon as COVID showed up. Those things are totally and completely unrelated, but I'm just throwing it out there. Some of us got suspicious after those things, a seemingly totally unrelated chain of events. So all that goes down, and we are left with zero trust. Okay. And all of a sudden, something happens in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and we're told that the Russians, well, might I add this, in December of 2021, the Russians present a document to NATO and the US, and that document says, we got some issues with what's happening in Ukraine. You guys are getting over the top here. And in the same way, they even mentioned, they said, this is kind of like a Cuban Missile Crisis moment for us. In the same way that you guys didn't want us moving into Cuba, we don't want you moving in Ukraine. Same difference, only Ukraine's closer. And we've been invaded by Hitler and Napoleon, and both times they went through Ukraine. This is not going to be stand with us. We don't want trouble. So let's sit down and have a discussion for indivisible security, which is something we'll get into. Indivisible. What does indivisible mean? That means I don't gain, you don't gain. Nobody gains. We all walk away and we all have our security. So they said, and if not, it could result in military or / technical a response by us. Let's sit down and talk. And what does the US say? Well, that's not even a starting point. What does the leader of NATO, Stoltenberg, say? Russia does not get a say in this. And I'm thinking, well, they got a military and nuclear weapons. I'm kind of thinking they're about to have their say right there. Now, I didn't. This is in hindsight. At the time, I didn't think Russia would attack, but I was wrong. And in hindsight, of course I was wrong, because that's what we would have done. That's what any superpower would have done if another superpower came up to their border. And I argue they did what they had to do. Okay, let's continue. So then we're told, hey, the Russians had launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine, and that we got various. Putin did it because he hates democracy. Really? That's weird. I thought that was he was won in a democratic election. Number two, he did it because he wants to expand the Soviet Union back to what it once was. Well, that's weird. I thought you said it was because he hated democracy. Is it one or the other? What is it? Right? What next? So we got two things that didn't really match. Hey, is it that he hates democracy? Yes. Is it that he wants to expand the Soviet Union? Yes. Well, then why did he send us a document prior to all of this saying how this is what we can do to prevent it? That's weird that he wants war, but he tried to prevent war. And then we're told he's a madman. I mean, just one story after the other, right? And there were those of us who said, okay, here's where we are, gang. You've lied to us repeatedly about Iraq. You've lied to us. I could go back. Remember the Maine Spanish-American War. That was a lie. How about the Gulf of Tonkin? It was a lie. Lie after lie after lie after lie. Hey, RFK and JFK, how were they killed? Just a lone wolf single shooter. Well, then why is it that you can't release the JFK files if in fact it was completely, just one single madman? That's weird, right? So incident after incident happens, and we're always, I mean, we could go after the MLK murder. What the hell was the FBI doing with a file that said literally Mur King, Murking, like Murder King? The FBI had a Murder King file, but they were completely uninvolved, right? Malcolm X, I mean, on and on and on, right? They've killed, we probably have no idea how many people, because people look at that and they say, well, they killed, black leaders. Let me tell you something. Hippie leaders, socialist leaders, anti-war leaders, on and on and on. It has been a war on dissent and dissidents constantly. I don't care if you're black, white, green, gray, or grizzly, as they say, you're pushing back against the machine. There's been a government war on you. They pretended that we had freedom and democracy when in truth, we've got domination and hypocrisy. But there are those of us who have come to those conclusions, right? Now, let me continue. So when it comes to Ukraine, those of us who said, well, we had a different scenario, because we had people who said, number one, we never trust the people in charge, so we feel that we're lying to them. They're lying to us. But number two, we do have ways to access detailed information about it. And we started looking into it. And what happened again? If you said the wrong thing about Ukraine, you were thrown off YouTube. You were thrown off X. You were thrown off Facebook. If you literally, I got suspended from Facebook. Guess why? I put up an NBC article, an NBC News article about soldiers in Ukraine, and they had pictures, and they had SS on their helmets, and they had Nazi symbols on their helmet. This was an NBC article. I put that up on Facebook, and I got suspended from Facebook for, like, I couldn't post for a long time. I couldn't go live for 3 months. All kinds of crap like that. Why? Because I put up an NBC article. Imagine that. So at that point, it's like, okay, I think we understand the game here. Once again, oh no, I'm going to be zapped by. I think it's I'm being zapped by the sun again. But we're going to continue to try to make this happen. Got a little bit of sunlight. So as I just said, sunlight's the best disinfectant. I guess the sun heard me and said, and here's an example. So we continue. So those of us who didn't trust them about anything, start looking, and we find that the government in 2014 overthrew the government of Ukraine. In fact, I was talking to someone recently. I was at at my radio station in DC, and afterwards, like the person who's going to do the next show, I had mentioned that Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And one says, "Oh, Ukraine's not one of the most corrupt countries in the world." And I said, "The U.S. is probably second." And the U.S. isn't second. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, okay." And she goes, "Yeah, I've got this list of right here of the most corrupt countries in the world." And I'm thinking, "Oh, yeah, probably came off the way." And she reads this list. Number one, whatever it is. Number two, Venezuela. And I'm like, okay. And like Nicaragua was number six. And I'm like, well, isn't it convenient that the countries that the neocon warmongers hate are all happen to conveniently be at the top of the list? Well, what do you know? And you believe that crap. Who made that list? John Bolton. But again, she believes the people who've been lying to us over and over. And I'm like, okay, so you were given a list. And you know what the first thing I would do with that list? I would see where it came from. And I would research who had it. That's what people like us do. When somebody says, here's a list of the most corrupt countries in the world, right? We say, well, where'd the list come from? Did it come from PolitiFact? Did it come from the Washington Post, the New York Times? We understand the game. So we're not going to accept the list anymore. That we're going to accept when the government tells us we got to stand 6 feet apart. We're going to say, oh, fine, I don't mind. I will do it. But you're going to have to show me where the recommendations come from, where the data comes from. That's going to make me believe that this is going to be that this is in my best interest because I don't trust you. All right, so we continue. So we start looking into Ukraine, and what do we find out? We find out that 2 weeks before the Ukraine changed government in a violent coup, that Victoria Nuland, who was then under Secretary of State, was recorded, and the recording was released, and you can still find it, naming the new government. So 2 weeks before the government of Ukraine fell, a person from the U.S. State Department named who the new government would be. But how would you know the government was going to fall? And what would give you the authority to name the new government? And when it was said to her, by then the U.S. ambassador Jeffrey Pott to Ukraine says to her, "Hey, the EU is not going to like that." She says, "F the EU." And in other words, no, we make these decisions. The EU doesn't get a voice in here. So now what do we learn? We learned that the United States knew 2 weeks, that the U.S. State Department 2 weeks before the government of Ukraine fell in a violent coup, the United States State Department knew it was going to fall, and the United States State Department was naming the new government. And then it fell, and then exactly what was suspected happened. And immediately, United States people in the U.S. government started flooding in there. One of the people who flooded in there was a guy named Amos Hochstein, a good friend of Joe Biden, a man who you can look this up, was later brought in to the Biden administration as a special envoy by Joe Biden. Do you know what his job was? His job was a special envoy to stop Nord Stream. And not long after he was brought in, Nord Stream was blown up. You know what? Former IDF tank commander Amos Hochstein. You know what Amos Hochstein is doing now? He's in the Middle East, supposedly working for the Biden administration as their special envoy to Israel. Yes, a former IDF tank commander is certainly going to be fair and honest when it comes to the Israeli conflict, isn't he? And you know what Amos Hochstein did when the 2014 a violent change of government happened? Amos Hochstein was working for the Biden, at that point the Obama State Department. He resigned his job at the Obama State Department. He then moved to Ukraine, and he joined a company on the board of this company, and the company was called Naftogaz. That is the official. It's like the Gazprom of Ukraine. It is the official gas company of the Ukrainian government. So crooked, shisty, thief, Amos Hochstein resigned from the U.S. State Department, went to Ukraine, and became a highly paid member of the Ukrainian official government gas company and lined his filthy pockets. At the same time, Joe Biden's son did the same thing with another gas company called Burisma. At the same time, a former assistant director of the CIA named Cofer Black did the same thing. In other words, you get in the picture? Cofer Black went and joined the board of Burisma. The government of Ukraine fell. The United States government, then a bunch of their people quit their jobs and moved to Ukraine so they could feather their nests and they could pick the bones of Ukraine and fill their pockets, including Joe. But now, what else happened? The Ukrainians started building fortifications for war with Russia. Isn't that interesting? As soon as the government changed and the United States named a new government, the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian military started preparing for war with Russia. And might I add, they went to war with Eastern Ukraine. Isn't that interesting? And the as the Ukrainian dissident military, which was Eastern Ukraine, went to war with the Ukrainian government, they had them surrounded in a town called Sabaltova. The Battle of Sabaltova is called. You can look it up. And the Eastern Ukrainians surrounded like 30,000 of the Ukrainian military, and they were going to wipe them out. Angela Merkel then flew to Moscow and said to Vladimir Putin, look, you got a lot of sway here. Can you stop them from wiping out the Ukrainians? And I'll tell you what, we'll come up with an agreement. It was called the Minsk Accords. And that was a guarantee for a bunch of stuff, including some autonomous regions in Ukraine, no more shooting at Ukraine, a great deal, and boom. And so you're going to end the conflict in Ukraine. The Russians said, yeah, signed off on it. They had Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. These were agreements. And then the Russian says, okay, let's institute it. And the US and France and Germany were supposed to be in charge of this, said, no, we're not going to do that. That was bullshit. And later on, both Angela Merkel, Petro Poroshenko, who was former president of Ukraine, and others all said, nah, the Minsk Accord was a lie. We only did that so we could have more time to arm Ukraine so they could fight Russia. Okay. So now those of us who research these things and find out these are true say, I think we've been had again. And it's pretty clear that we have. So here's my point. My point is, but we still got suckers everywhere that we don't understand. That's it. We don't understand. We look up at this and we say, I don't understand how you could get a third bite of that apple from in the subway. He stole your wallet one day. Just sit next to this guy. He steals your wallet the second day. Why would you sit next to him to a third day? Why would you believe him when he says, I'm not going to steal your wallet this time. I'm not going to move the football this time, Lucy. And that's where we are. We're looking at it saying, I don't trust this. And let me go on. We're people who tend to mostly bet on consistency. And we don't trust the government. Not because it's some kind of, with me, I'm not a libertarian who says I have an ideology that doesn't trust the government. Ideologically, I don't trust the government. That ain't it. It's not an ideological thing with me. It's data driven. I don't trust the government any more than I would trust anyone else who relied to me repeatedly. That's simple. It's a logical position. Just like a person, if I knew somebody that lied to me and over, I wouldn't trust them again. It makes sense. It's a safe bet. It's consistency. All of it makes sense. So now, that's where we are. We're a bunch of dumbasses who once again are being took, and we're just sitting here saying, we don't believe you. I'll say this. Even now, when it gets to politics as a whole, the people who have been called crazy idiots and conspiracy theorists. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people, the so-called conspiracy theorists, who say things that I think are absurd, or who believe things that I think are absurd. That being said, I'm not going to throw out the baby. What's that with the bathwater? I'm not going to say because you take a position here that I think is ridiculous and preposterous and illogical, I'm going to dismiss everything that you think or that you say, because that's what we're supposed to do according to the mainstream when it comes to people online. or people that don't trust the system. We're supposed to point to one thing that they do and summarily dismiss everything else. Remember the truckers in Canada? What did they say? Oh, we found a Nazi flag. Therefore, they're all Nazis. We found one thing. Therefore, we have to dismiss all of them. And there are those of us who say, yeah, I guess you found a Nazi flag. You stuck it up. We don't trust you bastards. We know the game. In the same way that I think it was Operation Northwoods, that literally our government wanted to take U.S. planes, paint them as Soviet planes, bomb U.S. cities, and then say we got to go to war with Russia because the Russians bombed us. Well, yeah, okay. So now we don't trust you when it comes to anything else. We don't trust that you won't take an action that appears to be something else and claim that you're protecting us from something when really we're protecting us. The only thing we need protection from is you. So here we sit today with the same people who never trust, the same conspiracy theorists. That's what they call us, isn't it? The people that don't trust the government. I'm a logical person. There are things that don't. I know people who believe in, what do you call it? Chemtrails. Logically speaking, I can poke too many logical holes in that. So I don't believe in chemtrails. But if you believe in chemtrails and I don't, that doesn't mean that when you present evidence on another issue and I look at it, I'm going to say, well, we disagree on chemtrails, so therefore you can't be right about this. That's the game that's played. No, we can disagree. You can believe in, I don't know, space monkeys. I don't care what you believe in. But if you present evidence on a particular issue, I'm going to evaluate the evidence of that issue. I'm not going to say because you were wrong about X, you have to be wrong about Y too. I'm going to look at the evidence you present for X, evaluate that, and then look at the evidence independently that you present about Y and evaluate that independently. No, but when it comes to the government, what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to dismiss the fact that they've presented false evidence intentionally with malice and aforethought and repeatedly lied. We're supposed to dismiss that and believe them about the latest lie they've told. Even then, we don't say they're lying about everything. What I say is I start from the perspective that they're probably lying, but I don't know for sure. And then I'm going to do a full evaluation and determine whether or not I should trust them on this one. I'm going to start with probably not, but it's possible. I'm not going to rule out that they could be telling the truth. Theoretically, they could, but I don't think they are. But I'm not going to let that cover my evaluation of the data that I can uncover. That's a logical thing to do, right? So here we sit now looking at this. And if you, the the position that you take on the government's position on Ukraine colors everything for this reason. If you believe that the government story that Putin is a bad guy and he's evil and he doesn't like democracy and we're protecting Ukraine and we're there to look out for Ukraine and all that, okay, then how should we react to the not even likelihood, the absolute reality now that the Russians are going to win and we're always going to win. But if you believe like I do that the government has lied to you, that our government overthrew the government of Ukraine like they have many other governments, and it was all done with malice and a forethought to take Russia out, to weaken Russia, to dominate the world, and that it was not done in the best interest of the Ukrainian people, the Russian people, the European people, or the American people. If you believe that, then you have to say no. Well, the only thing we need to do in Ukraine is get the hell out and mind our damn business. That's the truth of the matter. Oh, wow, it's raining here. Wow, coming down. Anyway, so that's where we are. That's my position. And we look at it and we say one of these days, it's going to be like COVID. It's obvious. It always happens. At some point, the dupes are going to wake up and say, I think I've been had about this Ukraine stuff. There are no weapons of mass destruction. There are no fill in the blank. And we'll be like, duh. I remember during the weapons of mass destruction thing, and I remember being in the cafeteria, and there was this guy, I liked him, but he believed and I didn't. And he walked in and he says, yeah, we got to fight him over here so we won't have to fight him over there. And I'm like, Bill, it makes no sense. How are the Iraqis going to get here? They don't have like a navy. None of it makes sense to me. It's not logical, but he bought into it. And then years later, he was, yeah, we were lied to about weapons of mass destruction. I'm like, no, no, no. You were lied to about weapons of mass destruction. I just heard want, lie, lie, lie. They couldn't lie to me. They could say things that I would laugh at because I already knew that they always lied. So here we are. You guys can probably hear the rain on the roof. But my point being, so here we are. And now let's move forward. So now I'll talk a little bit about the Trump thing since we got a few minutes left, and a little bit about what people saw, how we got here, and where we are moving forward with the Trump thing. Way back when, during George W. Bush, people started discussing the issue of a one world government, right? And words like global, and they were, remember this, they're crazy conspiracy theorists. One world government. Oh my God, you people are nuts, right? But then terms started coming about like globalism, right? And a global governance kind of system. And then you saw, how about the EU? That's getting rid of what the Europeans thought they had independence and sovereignty, but they never really did. But luckily they're learning now, but they didn't have independence and sovereignty. But that's bringing the European Union under one governmental non-elected agency, so the United States could easily control them, right? So that was part of the one world government thing. But I'm going to put this one world government thing a little bit differently, because there are people like, okay, one world government, as if it would be spread across the world in capitals. What Americans who believe in American exceptionalism and all this other stuff, some of these so-called conservatives and libertarians who are like, I'm against the one world government, but I believe in American exceptionalism and we must be dominant. What they're not getting is this. That is the one world government. The one world government was never a government where there's a headquarters in Brussels and there's a headquarters in Dakar and there's a headquarters in Caracas and a one world government. No, 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 no. A one world government was actually simply a U.S. domination of the world. The headquarters for that one world government would have been in Washington, D.C., right? There was, yes, a one world government, but the one government would have been the U.S. government. It was simply a different manner of stating total U.S. domination of the world. One world government. In other words, total U.S. domination. No other governments. Let me put it a different way. What we have in Europe, what we have in a lot of other countries, and that is U.S. puppets. Africa. What did the Brits and a lot of other colonial countries do when they left? They said, you've got independence. No, they didn't. They got a flag. They designed their own flag, and then they got what they thought was the government, but they had some puppet. They call them the comprador class, right? They would get some puppet, and the next thing you know, you have like Ghana. Ghana has all this gold, but it comes out of Ghana, and Ghana does not get any of the gold, and the gold is all marketed through New York, through the the economic district in New York. And so Ghana has the illusion, the appearance of a government, the illusion and appearance of economic freedom, but they don't really have it. That's what the whole one world government was. It was to create a dynamic where the whole world was like Europe, the appearance of independence, the appearance of sovereignty, the illusion of democracy, and the U.S. controls everything. And ultimately, when the U.S. says to Europe, to the ruling elite, okay, guys, it's time to wipe out your economy and impoverish your people, the European ruling elite just says, sure, of course. Yeah, no problem. We knew that all of that was our job. And if you call and tell us to do it, we're going to do it. So the one world government, as it were, was the people, so-called conspiracy theorists, were said to be morons and idiots because they were onto something. They didn't have the details just right. They had the wording right. They had the concept right, but they didn't understand, I don't think, that it wasn't a one world government. It was U.S. domination by the U.S. ruling elite. It wasn't going to benefit us any. We were going to get screwed the same, as you can see by now. Now, let me continue, because I had a couple other things. I had a few little notes here that I wanted to talk about. That So what we have now, let me talk about Trump. And don't get me wrong, there are those who say, well, Trump won and Harris, in theory, in some ways, I think, as I said, it wasn't that Trump had to win, but it was that Harris had to lose. And it wasn't that she had to lose. It was that she was going to lose. It was that the things that the Biden administration were doing. I'll put it like this. If I jump in the water, I'm going to get wet. There's no way. If you jump off a skyscraper, you're never going to go up. It's logic. You're going to go up, down. You're going to go down every time, right? The things that the Biden administration were doing, they had to lose. They were going to lose. There was no way around it. This was inevitable, right? That's the direction things were going. So Trump had to win because he was going to win, because he provided a different alternative. Now let's go on and talk about this. While there are those who would argue, okay, he's the same as them and he's going to continue the same. Let me put it a different way. Something Brother Caleb Maupin, if he's still on, talked about, and I learned from all the people that I listened to, and Caleb's, I've heard a lot of his discussions, and I've learned the concept about, he used the term Bonapartism, various factions of the ruling elite, and these factions of the ruling elite on their own don't have power, so they have to grab big chunks of the populace. So now this faction of the ruling elite is fighting that faction of the ruling elite, but each faction has grabbed big parts of the populace to join them in the fight against the other ruling elite faction who have big parts of the populace on their side, right? The Trump people, their faction really is the same in a way. This is still about world domination. In the issue of the neocons, they don't want, remember that term indivisible. The Russians used it when they said the security agreement they wanted in Europe was indivisible. We want to be secure, but our security doesn't compromise your security. Your security doesn't compromise our security, right? Okay. So the faction of the ruling elite that supports Biden doesn't want that. They want to use all manners, right? Full spectrum. We want to use diplomatic, economic, and we want to use kinetic war to get our way and dominate the planet. The Trump faction of the ruling elite is really similar, but they don't want to. It's a couple of things. They're a little freaked out by the push against First Amendment stuff, except for where they find it that it's important. They certainly agree 100% when it comes to the issue of Gaza and Israel, because they understand that the foundation of the U.S. empire, the foundation of the U.S. world domination is in the Middle East, because oil is the lifeblood of currently of international industry. And in order to dominate the planet, you got to have a strong presence there. So they are down with the Biden people when it comes to total and complete domination in that particular arena. However, they're more in, so, and when it comes to First Amendment stuff, that's their area where they're down with what the Biden administration says. We're opposed to, you should be able to talk about COVID. I would agree with them on that. You should be able to push back against the Ukraine conflict. I would agree with it on that. But you shouldn't be able to push back against the Gaza conflict. Well, here's the bottom line: either you got free speech or you don't. If free speech, if okay, you have free speech when it comes to this, and this, but not that. See, that's the ruling elite. That's what for instance, Elon Musk always talks about. He has a free speech platform. Why? Because the ruling elite believe not that we have ubiquitous, not that we have free speech in general, but that because they're the ruling class, we have free speech when they say it. So they believe that by their grace we have free speech. So that even though you got free speech, okay, but I'm still the ruling elite. Okay, you still have to acknowledge that I'm the ruling elite. So you have free speech, except here and there may be something where I decide you don't have free speech. But since I'm the ruling elite, you just got to accept that. As opposed to those out there who are saying no, we don't agree with that. Free speech should be in general. There's still the fight for free speech does not end when Donald Trump takes power, when a new faction of the ruling elite take power, because there are no factions of the ruling elite that are going to say you should have general and broad abilities to express opposition to the ruling elite, because they are the ruling elite still, and they understand we want to dominate the planet. Now, the term is, keep getting back to, is indivisible security, whether it's economic or military, right? So we go from people who say we should be use kinetic warfare to get what we want, to not to a Trump people that are, let's just face it this way, they're a little more realistic. And what they say is, number one, we can't, because if we go toe to toe with Russia, we're probably going to die, all of us, and we don't want to do that. And I also believe that Trump himself doesn't want war with China. Now, he may have people in his cabinet, but I believe Trump himself doesn't. And I believe, based on some things that J.D. Vance says, I don't think they want a kinetic war with China. J.D. Vance says we can't beat them at this point. Now, some of these people, he may want to build up the military to a point where we can, which ain't going to happen, because, by the way, China's building up their military like 10 times faster. As an example, China has one missile factory that can make 1,000 missiles a day. In other words, in like 12 days, they can make as many missiles as the whole U.S. has. One missile factory. China has what, 30 to 40% of the world's industrial capacity. We can build 4 Navy ships a year, and China builds 200. You're not going to win that. Okay, their industrial capacity, which we used to have. Do you know in the 1950s, at one point, the United States had 50% of the world's industrial capacity? But they had to pay people, and now we can't be paying the nobodies. We can't be paying the plebes, giving them a decent standard of living when there's free and slave and sweatshop labor to be had all over the world. Close these factories, and we'll make the money somewhere else. That's what the ruling elite did, and now they're pissed off over their mistake, and they want to go blame China and these other countries. Anyway, so what the Trump people want to do is a different version of what the Biden people want to do. So Trump now says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do economic aggression against China and other countries, right? Well, that's still not indivisible, because economic is economic war is still going to produce casualties. You're going to produce economic casualties. Let me give you an example. The Biden administration against Russia is doing both a kinetic war, when they're trying to keep our distance from it, or at least they have been up until now, and an economic war against China, against Russia, a massive economic war against Russia, and there are economic casualties. We're some, it's costing us money. All over the world, it's costing people money. The Europeans are really getting hammered. So you're having casualties of war, but it's an economic war, right? So there are people like us who believe in indivisible relationships from a security perspective. We got security on our border with the country on the other side. We don't get an advantage or a disadvantage. They don't get an advantage or a disadvantage. Indivisible. If we have an economic disagreement with China, we need to come up with a plan where we have an indivisible plan to resolve it. In other words, afterwards, we don't get an advantage. China doesn't get an advantage. Everybody eats, as they say. So what happens? Well, we got an issue. And in fact, I heard Trump say something. He'd never get it through, but it was a perfect example of how you can resolve these issues. One of the things that Trump said was, when it comes to China, what we'll do is this. If they want to sell EVs here, good. We'll open factories here, they can build the Chinese vehicles here, and then they can sell them here, and we'll have jobs, which, might I add, is a great idea, except there's a problem. And the problem is that the cost of living here is so high that what they would have to pay their employees in order for their employees to survive is so high that I don't think they'd be able to sell the electric vehicles for the same price that they can sell them, because the cost of living is so stinking high for people here. So it's a good idea. I don't think Trump could ever get it through if he really did want to get it through. I think personally, I think Trump would, if he could get away with it, he'd do that. But I just don't think that that's the direction that the ruling elite wants to go. They don't want indivisible. They want to get an advantage out of everything. Let me add this. And what we're looking at, whether it's the Biden administration or the Trump administration or various factions of the ruling elite, is this. What's the opposite of indivisibility, right? That says, I'm going to enrich myself. I'm going to improve my position at the expense of whoever this other group I'm dealing with, right? I'm going to do that. So if I'm going to do it at the expense, kinetically, that means I'm going to blow up your factory. I'm going to blow up your country and mine, your stuff. I'm going to defeat your military, and mine's going to be, we're going to have some casualties, but we're going to win. It is and I add this, it is the willingness to take casualties on my side. Well, economically, we can see that's what they're doing now. Economically, we're the casualties. And might I add, you could look at it this way: the ruling elite in America, what they're doing to the working class people here is they're enriching themselves. See, it would be fine if it was indivisible, if we're saying you can enrich yourselves as long as you don't hurt us. We all eat together, right? A rising tide raises all ships. Fair enough. And the working class people here are saying we're willing to do that. We're certainly willing to do that. Ruling elite, you can get rich as long as we all eat together, right? They're saying no. We want to enrich ourselves at your expense. We want to enrich ourselves by cutting your benefits, by inflicting austerity policies on you. We're going to cut your Social Security, cut your Medicare, cut your Medicaid, cut everything that you have, any subsidy that you have, anything that helps the poor, the working class. We're going to cut all of that stuff. And the ruling elite and the corporate owners will still get richer and richer and richer, and you'll get poorer and poorer and poorer. If we introduce some new medical, whether it's a vaccine or whatever it is that you can take, the countries that create them will be enriched, but something really bad could happen to you, or they could be dangerous. So they'll get rich at your expense, and we will stop your ability to look into it. We will hide data that we have that may show something that may not be in your best interest. Again, it's not indivisible, it's the best. It's not individual. It is the improvement of the position of the ruling elite at the expense of the working class. It is improving the position of the ruling elite in the United States at the expense of the Russians, at the expense of the Chinese, at the expense of the working class in Europe. It's always this: we're going to improve the position of US corporations and corporate owners and ruling elite at the expense of others. And those of us who have had enough of that crap. And that is the pushback now. And what a lot of Trump supporters are going to learn the hard way. And I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not an anti-Trump supporter. And I understand those who said, I'd rather see Trump in there than Harris, simply because there was no such thing as Harris. She was a fully created instrument of the neoliberal, neoconservative machine. They created her out of thin air. They had worse than thin air. They had someone who had the worst approval ratings of any what do you call it? Of any vice president ever. And they decided that they were going to use money and use all of their machinations in the so-called media and use suppression to ensure that she was now viewed as a beautiful, perfect, wonderful leader for us all forever. So much so, what did they do? I had things that I put up on Facebook about Kamala Harris, and it was taken down. Yeah, I would like to say to Twitter, but as you know, Mr. Free Speech, it doesn't have me on Twitter right now. So the bottom line was this: they thought they could create something, a nothing out of thin air, and that the American people would say, yeah, well, there's a lot of schmucks that had enough trust to say yeah. And what really beat them, if you ask me, was not that all of these people went to Trump. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people did go to Trump from various groups that normally vote Democrat. But what really beat them more than anything else was the number of people that stayed home. A lot of people just said, screw this, I'm unhappy, I'm staying home. And so now they ended up having to deal with that. And thusly they lost. I don't think the number of people that voted for Trump really changed that much. But the number of people that voted for Harris, for the Democrats, went down. And what's odd, though, if you look at it, it was really odd because the number of people that voted for the Democrats was fairly even. And then in 2020, it jumped up astronomically by like 15 million for Biden. And then in 2024, it jumped back down to the mean, to where it normally was. And there are those who are suspicious of that. And based on history, they have right. I don't know, but there are those suspicious of those numbers. But whatever the case may be, we look at it now, and now what we have is a Another faction of the ruling elite who do not believe in an indivisible relationship with anyone else and are willing to take economic casualties. Think about this. When Trump says we're going to add tariffs to all of these countries, right? What is he really saying? If you need a part, right? If you need, like, for instance, I got a boat, right? I got an 18 footer. It's an older boat that I refurbed, right? And just so people say, oh, well, tell me about it. I'll make it real quick. It's an older boat. I looked at all these new boats and I'm like, these things are expensive. What the hell am I going to put myself in debt, but trying to buy a boat that I can't afford anyway, right? So I bought an older boat. It's a 85 Steiger craft center console, right? But replace the floor, replace the um back of it, the transom. I've got an older motor. It's a 2002 or 2002 um Yamaha two-stroke, right? It's an older motor, but these things are known to run forever. So rather than go out and get a new boat and spend all of this money, I got something that's not going to keep me in debt and it's paid for and nobody's going to come take it, right? And it didn't cost all that much in consideration, right? And I might add, I forgot what the hell I was talking about when I got started talking about my boat, because when I start talking about fishing and boats and stuff like that, forget it. I don't even know anything else. So who cares? Let's go fishing. Where's my rods? Oh, okay. Back. The ADD is hell, isn't it? But at any rate, I digress. At some point, it'll come up back to me what the hell I was talking about, but who cares? So let's go. Let's continue. Let's continue. So now the faction of the ruling elite that are in are saying, let's not use kinetic warfare. Let's use economic warfare. Oh, it came back to me. So here's my point. There was a little part that I needed for my motor. Nothing big, but pretty fairly inexpensive. And I found out, oh yeah, they're waiting for it. It's an electrical little thing, and it comes from China. When I was doing my refurb and everything, and my motor had been sitting for 3 years when I bought it, so I'm retweaking it and getting it all right and everything right. And there was a little part that had some corrosion, and it worked. And I said, I want to replace that. It's a cheap part. Okay, it came from China. Whatever, it costs $100. According to Trump's new tariffs, it costs $120. Trump's going to put 20% on everything from China and whatever, right? So here's the bottom line. If you think about it, their attempt to dominate China economically will produce economic casualties. That's us. When I go to buy that part again, hopefully I'll never have to buy it, but let's say if I go to buy that part again, guess what? It'll be $20 higher. When I go to buy all kinds of stuff, oh my gosh, I look around at my computer stuff that I got right here, right? I got a little Verizon thing that is it's an Orbit. It's used for as a hotspot. I'm looking at all of these things. I got my little Anchor brick, right? This thing, it's used to charge stuff with, right? I look at all of that stuff, which reminds me, I better plug in my charger or I'm going to quickly run out of internet. All of that comes from China via Amazon, some of it, or wherever, Micro Center, it's going to go up 20%. So here's my point. The ruling elite faction that says we're not going to have a cooperative relationship with China where we resolve our issues indivisibly. We're going to have a dominant relationship with China where we attempt to impose the solutions to our problems on them using economic warfare. Understand that it's going to produce casualties. In the same way that the economic war against Russia produced casualties in Europe, Trump's economic war in China will produce casualties here. So that's all it is. They've decided we're going to be casualties, but we're just going to be a different kind of casualties. You're going to have to pay more. People are like, hey, Trump's in. Oh, really? And what's his plan? Okay, he's going to do all of this tariffs against China. Ask yourself, as a working class person, is he doing it to help you? Well, hell no, because it's going to hurt you immediately. As soon as he does it, you will be hurt. All of these countries, he's going to, yes. And Trump says they're destroying the dollar. We got to save the dollar. And how are you going to do it? Well, we're going to save the dollar by putting sanctions all over the place and raising the prices on you. And what else is that going to do? We're going to help lower inflation. Why? By putting tariffs. And that, might I add, We'll put tariffs on Mexico. Really? What's that going to do? Well, let's see. 50% of the fruits and vegetables in the United States that we eat comes from Mexico. 20% on that means you'll pay 20% more for all that stuff. In other words, the faction of the ruling elite simply have said, we're not going to do that indivisible thing. And we understand that there are going to be casualties, and you poor bastards are the casualties. That's what it is. That's the reality. Nonetheless, I think that's it. It is indivisible security and indivisible economic growth, right? As opposed to economic growth and security that is created by domination, where one side improves and the other side suffers. The other side regresses, and you get worse off, and we get better off. So here's my point to end it up with this, because it's time to chill, and people got things to do, and there are those who are eat turkey and all kinds of stuff that people are going to do. I'll end it up by saying this. It all comes back to what I said in the beginning. If you are a person who doesn't trust the government, if you're a person who looks and you say, I don't trust them because of history, then you ain't going to trust them. I don't care if you voted for Trump or didn't vote for Trump. You're always going to say, if Trump comes forward and says, we're going to do this, you ain't going to trust it. And you're going to say, I need more data and I need more information. And most likely, Trump is leading another faction of the ruling elite, and they're going to stand up to screw us. And oh, by the way, they're going to tell us they're for First Amendment and freedom of speech. But as soon as we say, I don't agree with something Israel does, they're going to say, oh, no, you don't, you Hamas terrorists. They're going to be harder on you than the Democrats were harder on people for questioning COVID, because they only got one thing, and that's their big one. And if they start going after China and you start saying, hey, I don't think what we're doing here is costing us more money, trust me, your First Amendment rights will be out the window on that one too. So anyway, thanks a lot, everybody. I'm rolling. Lastly, I'll say this. If you can, as you know, you see everything scrolling across the bottom. Buy me a coffee, Patreon, PayPal. Anything you can do to help the channel is highly appreciated. Make sure everyone clicks the like button. And if you're not subscribing, please subscribe, because how the hell do I have over 700,000 views in a period of 28 days, and I pick up 4 subscribers? I mean, I'm being facetious, but literally nothing, zero, right? So you know what's going on there. So please subscribe. Also, I have one person who's told me they've been unsubscribed from my channel 4 times. If you can afford to donate. Even if you can't, buy me a coffee is great. And buy me a coffee, you can now do like Patreon. You can make one donation, or you can become a donator, a regular, a monthly subscriber. Also, share this on all your social media platforms. As you know, I'm not on X and all kinds of stuff like that. I'm going to be updating people. I got something going on with that X stuff that I'm moving legally towards a goal there. But so I'll let people know about the middle of December to late December what's going on with that. And but share this, please. We got 641 people. Hopefully, I can get 641 shares on Facebook, on X, on what's the other one? Telegram, you name it, Instagram, all of that. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. And of course, hey, I'm here. Here we go. There's my rod. You know what I'm all about. Although it's raining, I can't fish today. And of course, my boat's up for the summer. But as I said, I may my radio station and my main source of income, although I'm not starving, I do have a meager retirement from law enforcement that I can, that I at least I can afford to eat one bean a day. That's what I'm down to, one bean a day. You can do pretty good off of a bean a day and a cup of water. That's what I'm living off of. But at any rate, nobody's going to take my old boat because I refurbished and rebuilt it myself, and it doesn't have any payments. How wonderful is that? All right, have a great day. Share this everywhere. Peace. I'm out. Figure out how to close this damn thing out. There we go.